Good morning to all. Thank you for joining us in this session this morning. Can I begin?
Yes, please do.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen, my slideshow. Okay. Good morning, students, and everybody who's watching the session this morning. Thank you for joining us on your Saturday morning. This morning, we are focusing on English for Teachers, EFT100, and you have registered for this module last year in July. So you're at the tail end and you actually have an assignment due for tomorrow. So this morning, what I have decided to do, I have opened up a preference poll for you last week on the 30th of April, and it closed this week. And from 199 of you that have registered for this module, 61 of you responded. And the main aspect that you wanted me to focus on for this session is on the writing skills. Okay, so that is what we're going to look at this morning. And this actually focuses on your assessments as well. Okay, so your writing skills features in the balance of your assessments as well. So without further ado, let us begin. So the outcomes for this morning's session, we're looking at your short story, your fable, and poetry analysis, your formal email, and essay writing. Okay, so you are teaching in a preschool classroom, and I'm sure by now you know that little children, especially your preschool learners, love stories. They love listening to stories. So even if you have to conduct a lesson, the best way for their favorite time is actually story time. Okay, so in this module, why it is important for you to know about storytelling um, is because you need to know how to adapt your lesson into a story form. Okay. So a part of your assignment that is due for tomorrow, you know, the first part focuses on a short story where you had to write a short story. But in your upcoming assessments as well, you will foresee questions based on short stories as well. So this morning we're looking at some of the elements that goes into a short story. Would anybody like to brief us on what goes into a short story? If there's anybody who feels up for it, what elements go into a short story? What makes up a short story? Anybody? Okay, I'm going to give you some time for that coffee to kick in. So your characteristics of a short story, as it says, it's usually short and it's concise, okay? And there's generally one or two characters and it does not go into much detail. These are some of the elements that go into the short story, right? And this morning we're going to look at each of the elements and unpack this. And then we're going to proceed to how you can apply this to a fable if you are given in a test or an assessment situation. Right, so the first element that we are looking at is the setting, and the setting looks at the time and the location in which the short story takes place. For some of the short stories, or for some stories, the setting is very important because it becomes an integral part of the story. Okay, while for others, the setting may not be important, the characters are more important. So when you're looking at the setting, even if it's for your assignment where you have to actually write the short story, or whether you are asked to analyze a short story, focus on your place, where the action is actually taking place, or the time, which period or which era it is in, whether it's in the past, the present, the future. Okay, your location can be anywhere. Remember, it is a very creative piece, so you can use your imagination is not limited, right? Weather conditions. You would understand that when weather conditions can actually play a role in setting the mood or the tone of the story. Okay. So for instance, when somebody says it's sunny and bright, it gives a sense of feeling happy and joyful. Whereas if it's stormy or It creates the sensation of feeling gloomy, right? And then you look at the social conditions, for example, um, the customs of the place, or how the characters converse with each other, and the mood or the atmosphere. So, for example, as I said, when the story begins, the setting and the words that the writer chooses to convey what the mood or the atmosphere is done using a lot of adjectives. For example, it is bright and cheerful or dark and frightening. So in this aspect, your adjectives from what you used in your unit one, your parts of speech, this is where it becomes um, useful and you can apply that in this section. Okay. The setting is integral to the story. As I said, it could take place anywhere, anytime. You are not limited to your imagination. Right, moving on, the characters. Before I move on to the characters, are there any questions with the setting? Are there any questions in regard to the setting? Okay. The characters in the story. Now, the characters can be defined in two ways. You're actually looking at the character itself or the characteristics of the people in the story. So, as I said, your short story has few characters, right? You have the main character, and please use the word protagonist when you are writing in a test or an assessment situation. By using the words protagonist and antagonist, you're actually showing the marker that you know that you are speaking about story writing. Okay, so your protagonist is the main character of the story. This person is central to the story. The story revolves around this person, and all the major events have some importance to this character. In opposition, or the villain of the story, the bad person, is the antagonist. Right? Further, the characters must seem real to the reader. So, for example, if you're going to create a character where you just say, character X is a boy, that sounds flat. That sounds unreal. Okay, you're just telling your reader that this character is a boy. What more? You need to give some depth to your character. Okay, so characters become convincing if they are consistent, if they resemble real people. And how do you provide information about the character? Okay, so you look at the actions or you write about the actions, for example, what the character does or how the character portrays him or herself. Okay, then you look at the emotions and the dreams or the conversation of the character. So, how this character converses with other people or other characters in your story. And then the physical appearance, when you describe your character, the physical appearance of your character, it makes that character seem more real. And then the reaction from others is basically pertaining to how other characters in your story sees this character or views this character and converses with this character. So in essence, when you are looking at the character, try to be more convincing and basis on a real life situation or real people. Even if your characters are animals or some aspect or some object such as a tree or a building, if you clearly remember your assignment that is due for tomorrow, I did say that you can give human-like qualities to your animals, which are the main characters in your story. Okay, so when I'm speaking of characters here, I'm not just referring to human beings. I'm referring to any character that you portray in your story. Okay, so yes, you can give them qualities, human-like qualities as well. In fact, that's what we are actually looking for. Are there any questions in terms of the characters thus far? Okay, I'll move on. So just to cap on what I just said, your characters can be round, for example, round not physically, but round in terms of them having many-sided or complex personalities. Okay, So that is how you can that is how you can portray a character. Or if your character can be a developing character. For example, when you start off in your story, your character can start off as one type of personality, but as the story moves on, at the end, they develop through the story. Maybe some aspect happened in the story that changed them and developed them. It could be for the better or worse. Or you could have a static, a stereotypical character where this person does not change. It's just one aspect that is shown. For example, I have here the brilliant detective, or the drunk Scrooge, or the cruel stepmother. So, an example of main characters or characters, I use one of my favorite fairy tales, Beauty and the Beast, and the main characters here are Beauty and the Beast, and the side characters or the other characters are her father. And then if we analyze the character of Beauty, we see that she's kind, caring, brave, beautiful, accepting, respectful, and she upheld her father's word. Now, if you look at the words that I chose to describe the character of Beauty, once again, I've used a lot of adjectives. Okay, I'm just bringing this to your attention where I'm trying to show you how the other units that you have covered thus far overlap finally with the last unit. This writing skills unit is the last unit in your study manual as for the content of this module. Okay, your first unit that you began with, which I'm not covering this morning because you've already done this last year, is your parts of speech and your grammar and punctuation. So I am actually trying to show you how that now overlaps with this unit as well. Okay, so this was just an example of a character analysis um, and some of the adjectives that you can use to describe your character. Right, the next element that we are looking at is the point of view. So I deliberately flipped this over to show you the angle from which the story is told. And there are 3 points of view, or three angles that a story is told, or which the story can which the story can unfold. So the first one we're looking at is the first person. Now that's the first person viewpoint whereby one of the characters from the story is actually relating the events as it is unfolding. Okay, so it can be any character, not necessarily the protagonist. It could be the antagonist as well, or any of the other characters, even the side characters could be narrating how the story is unfolding. Okay, then the omniscient, that's from a third person point of view. So, for example, this is not one of the characters in the story. This can just be the writer actually narrating how the story is unfolding. So, for example, this is the first person okay, which takes us through how the story is unfolding. Neither is he or she the writer. The observer is basically the audience or the reader. And so what the writer does is the writer just relates the events or just puts the events down on paper. And the observer then, which is the audience or the reader, has to interpret it or can interpret the events in the way that they feel how to what their interpretation is. Okay. Are there any questions on the point of view, or is everybody clear on the first person, omniscient, and observer? Okay, if there's no questions, I'll move on. Right, next we have the plot. The next element is the plot. This is basically what happens in the story. It's the sequence of events. It helps if your plot is planned and logical, especially if you're reading a story to a preschool learner. Okay, I know for the adult genre, some of the stories can unfold in different ways. It can go back and forth. But generally, when you're reading to a preschool learner, a planned and logical plot is expected. Okay. So this has a definite beginning, middle, and end. And in a short story, because it's short, it can be done in one read or in one sitting. So if you have a look at this diagram, okay, it seems like a graph, and you're probably wondering what is this doing in literature, in story writing? Well, it's just there to help you to see how your story or your plot should unfold. So where you can see at the beginning the flat line, that is your introduction. That is where you will introduce your characters, the setting, location. Okay. Then the initial incident is where the conflict, you are introduced to the conflict in the plot. Okay. The rising action then creates the tension in the plot, and it deepens the conflict. Okay, that's your rising action, is where the tension is created. The turning point as well, it deepens the tension. It's bringing you up to the climax of the story. The climax of the story is then the highest point of tension. This is where the reader is confused, and is now a mystery is put in there for the reader to wonder what will happen next, or what will the outcome of this be. The falling action then tries to unsolve the tension, or the mystery that has been built up thus far. And then the end, that fancy word there, denouement, that's basically the end of the story, where the final outcome is. So if you're writing a story, even if it's a short story, these are the factors that we would look for in the plot or the storyline. If you can read your story after you've written it, and if you can see that you have these factors in it, then you know you're on the correct path. Are there any questions regarding this? Okay, if there's none, we'll move on. So conflict is is another aspect. Okay, conflict is essential to the plot. As you saw in the previous diagram, the conflict helps to build up this tension, and then where the reader is now drawn to await what will the outcome be like. Without the conflict, there is no plot. So imagine telling a story, and you do not have the audience or your reader captivated, where they're not sitting there and thinking, okay, what is going to happen next? They don't have that sense of anxiety of what will happen next. Right? The conflict provides for that to happen. So the conflict is any form of opposition that the main character faces. Okay. In a short story, there may be one struggle or one conflict. If you have like a novel, for example, there are many conflicts. Okay. But generally, there is one dominant struggle. There's different types of conflict. So, for example, your character versus character, where it's a physical conflict. So, one character does not agree, or disagrees with the other character, be it a human versus an animal, or a human versus another human being, right? That's your physical conflict. Your character versus your circumstances, known as your classical conflict, that is basically, for example, if the character is facing an issue, or something of fate or destiny, something where the character hoped to happen, but it went in the opposite direction, that's circumstances. Your character versing society, that is your societal conventions, or for example, like poverty, or if the character loses a job, or if the character has to face some sort of other pressures from society. And then the character versing himself or herself is psychological, that's internal conflict, okay, where the character begins to question himself or herself. Why is this important? Because when you are writing your character, you are setting up your characters, and when you're trying to show conflict and how your plot advances, this type of conflict, where it's shown through the character, helps you to achieve um, the climax of your story, helps you to achieve that sense of mystery in your story. Okay, moving on. The theme of the story is also very important, and one of the questions or one of the aspects that we generally ask students when they are writing is to provide the theme of the story. So this is this can be the underlying or the main message that the writer is trying to convey. Sometimes it is stated explicitly, sometimes it is implied, but your story, whether you're writing or whether you're analyzing, should have a theme. Can anybody share with me what types of themes you generally have in a story that a preschool learner is reading or is being read? Yeah. So some of the themes that you can look at is, for example, good versus bad, or kind versus unkind, or somebody who's helpful, or the hero of the story who saved the day. Uh, Generally, the themes of the story, especially if it's a story for a preschool learner, try staying away from something that's gruesome or something that has an unhappy ending. Okay. I have received some of the stories in the past from some students where it became very gory, with characters being murdered brutally or dying in the end. And if you put yourself in that situation, think about reading this to your preschool learner. You're going to have them in tears. Okay. So I'm not saying that you should hide away from the reality of this world, but think about it when you're reading to a preschool learner. You They basically believe in happy endings. Okay. So your theme should be something around that. Okay. So if you're up for this, I'd like you to take a few minutes and think of one of your favorite fairy tales when you were growing up, and then use the elements of storytelling to analyze the fairy tale. Just basically two sentences per each of the elements. Okay, we can take a few minutes to do this. And if you would like afterwards, you can share this with us. Okay, would anybody like to share this with us, or their favorite fairy tale and how they use the elements to analyze their fairy tale?
To any of our students watching and wanting to share, simply raise your hand using the Zoom raise hand button, and I'll be able to contact you and advise you on how to share.
Okay.
Sonia, while we wait for some input, I've got a question from a YouTube viewer, Caitlin, who's just joined us. And the question is, when is the assignment due? Caitlin says she's a higher certificate distance learning student.
Okay. Good morning, Caitlin. Thank you for your question and welcome. The assignment, if you have registered last year in July 2019, then your assignment is due on the 10th of May, which is tomorrow. Um, I hope that answers your question. It's due tomorrow, the 10th of May. Are there any other questions?
No other questions for now.
Okay, can we proceed?
Yes, please do.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no other questions, I'm going to proceed to the next section, which is on poultry. And again, your assignment that's due tomorrow, part B of it, focuses on poultry. Why am I going over this? If your assignment is due tomorrow, because that is not the last of where you will see poultry. You will be tested on this again. So it is important. The section is important. So, what is expected of you in terms of poetry? No, I do not expect you to write a poem, but that would be lovely if you would want to write it and share it with us. But for this section, you need to understand the poetic devices and apply these in analyzing the poems. And you need to be able to formulate an activity to teach the poem to your learners. So, the poetic devices that I'm talking about, I am not going to go through each one this morning. I will have already uploaded the notes for you on for the section for the devices on your ECI page. Um, these are just some of them, as you can see, your rhythm and simile, metaphor, assonance, alliteration. Okay, um, and I would expect you to use each one of these in your analysis of the poem. So if you remember, you had three poems, a choice of three poems on your ECI page, and I had asked you to choose one, and you were expected to analyze this. So I was actually looking for you to take these poetic devices and analyze each stanza in the poem. Okay. In an assessment situation as well, that is exactly what's expected of you. So you will use the relevant poetic devices. When I say relevant, I do not expect you to mention every single device that you can come up with. I say relevant because you need to read the poem and be able to identify which device, poetic device, is applicable to that poem. So please use the words stanza and not paragraph, okay, when you're referring to a poem, and use the words quote instead of writer. Okay. So when we are marking your work and we see you use those terms, we already acknowledge that the student understands the correct terms. And I'm not saying it's going to give you 10 extra marks, but it would help. It would help in your final mark. It would help in pushing you from that 49% or 48% to 50% or that 65% to 66%, that kind of thing. Okay, so an example would be in stanza 2, line 5, the poet uses a metaphor when she states that, or in stanza 1, line 13, the poet uses alliteration when she states that or he states that. So in your assignment that is due tomorrow, I would have expected where you made reference or where you use the term metaphor or alliteration or any other of the poetic devices, you were expected, and was a part of the instructions in your assessment guide, that you had to reference that. So if you said metaphor, I would have expected you to give me a definition with some reference about what a metaphor is, or what an alliteration is, or any of the other poetic devices. So, for example, if you said in stanza 2, line 5, the poet uses metaphor when she describes this, um, you would then go on to say a metaphor can be defined as, and then you would reference that. Okay. Then your activity to teach the poem, this can be in the form of a play or role playing or music or dance or painting or whatever else. I mean, don't restrict your creativity at this point. I'm just using some of the more common examples. Some students in the past have given me really good activities, some of the stuff which I have never even thought of. So when you asked about an activity, so some students had the query about whether this is similar to a lesson plan. I do not expect an entire lesson plan from you for this aspect. It could be in the form of one paragraph or two paragraphs at the most, where you can show me how you will take the poem and actually teach it to your learners. What method? Because if you think about it correctly, if you are reading a nursery rhyme or a poem to a preschool learner, and if you just have them sitting there and just reading it, to you it may be exciting and you get the gist of it and you understand the poetic devices. A learner in grade R or a preschool learner does not really get all those poetic devices. So therefore, as a teacher, you have to become the medium where you teach them about poetic devices, but you have to do it in a way that is interesting and intrigues them, captures their attention. Okay. And learners at that age like role playing, or they like plays and music and dancing, even painting. Okay. So obviously, as their teacher, you know what your learners like best. Right? So you can tell me exactly what you do with your learners as in reality, or if you haven't reached that stage as yet with your learners, you can think about something imaginative but realistic at the same time. Okay, so in terms of your poems, you're not restricted to just, as you know, there's not just nursery rhymes. You have other poems as well. So your nursery rhymes, um, obviously the more famous ones, but your other poems comes into play where you start teaching your learners about other aspects such as nature. So this is just one example of the sea, where it's compared and likened to a dog, a hungry dog. Okay, and then something about social skills. Okay, this is about bullying, where you make your learners aware of issues around you. So you can source out poems that you know that would help your learners or bring a moral to your learners. As the poems in ECI are not nursery rhymes, and some of you were questioning the fact how then do you relate that to your preschool learners? As I said, use activities. They are there basically. I chose those poems because they have a moral to it, and you are teaching your learners about something different. Okay, so are there any other questions regarding poetry or the poetry aspect in your assessment? Anybody? Are you comfortable with this? Okay, if there's no other questions, I'm moving on to the next section. So the next section is informal emails, and I would have taken a picture of an email from my laptop and put this up, but I did not do that deliberately because in an assessment situation, I would expect you to literally write this out, or in this case, type it out as I have on the screen. So when I'm marking this section in your assessment, I could give you a scenario and ask you to create a formal email. You're thinking at this point, at this stage, why am I asking about a formal email? To be honest, I still get emails from students, even your colleagues, that read hi, or students still have an issue with sending a formal email. Okay, so in an assessment situation, I would expect you to literally write this out to the recipient, okay, and CC, that's copying in the person that you would like to copy. If you do not feel like putting a person's name there, you can literally write their CC. Then the subject heading, it has to be written in capital letters. Again, I know it's a bit pedantic about this, but it shows us that you know the requirements of writing a formal email. Okay, so that's your subject heading. Then you should leave a line, and then your greetings or your salutations. So, for example, dear ma'am or sir, or good day, or in this case, dear Mr. Hagrid, I trust that you are well, or I hope that this email finds you well. Remember, you're actually getting marks for all of this, even the previous slide. You are getting marks. for all of that if you write all of that out. Then introduce your content, okay? And then remember that in a test situation, if the instruction reads 150 words, it's only for the content of the email, okay? And your salutations and the format are additional. And then finally end off with yours sincerely or kind regards. And here I have Hermione Granger. Okay. Are there any questions on this? Okay. So as I said, this will feature in one of your assessments. Right. Finally, we have 5 minutes and I have the last section to go through essay writing. Now, in this section, I could look at essay writing conventionally, but I'm trying to overlap this with the first aspect that we covered this morning, which was on your story writing and even how to answer your poetry question in an assessment. So I would expect it in an essay format. Okay. And if you know by now, an essay has an introduction, a body, and conclusion. I'm going through this quickly here this morning, but there's a PowerPoint up for you on your ECI page and examples as well on how to construct academic essays. Okay, so in the introductory paragraph, you have basically your general statement or your thesis statement. That is where you would introduce what you aim to do in this essay. Then your body has to have paragraphs, and each paragraph has to have a topic sentence, a supporting sentence, and a concluding sentence. And then finally, your concluding paragraph. Okay. So in the essay writing, in an assessment, you would actually state this essay in the introduction. You would actually state this essay. In this essay, one will aim to do this, or this essay aims to analyze the fable or the poem, and the elements that will be discussed are, for example, the setting, the characters, the plot, the conflict. Okay. And then, as I said, in the body, use paragraphs and discuss each element or each poetic device in a new paragraph. Okay, and I've given you an example there as well. And we are expecting you to quote examples from your fable or from your poem in order to substantiate your point. As in quote, as in with quotation marks. Okay, this will actually add to your marks. And in the conclusion of your essay, there should not be any new information or any new ideas, right? And you begin the conclusion by saying, in conclusion, or to conclude, and summarize the points that were stated in the introduction or the body of the assignment, of the essay. Okay, and that's a wrap. Are there any other questions? Any questions on any of the sections? Okay, if you do not have questions at this point, or if you're not sure about asking me, feel free to message me on ECI or you can send me an email. If you missed something this morning, this video will be up for you. It will be available to you. Or you can email me and you can say, I did not understand this. Can you please repeat this for me? And I'm happy to do that. Good luck with your submission of your assignment tomorrow. And are there any questions?
Sonia, no questions on YouTube and no questions on Zoom.
Okay. Thank you very much to everyone for the session this morning, and thank you to the Delta team for your help.
Thank you, Sonia, and we wish you a lovely weekend.
Thank you. You as well.
To our audience just joining us now, welcome to this distance learning event. The next session will be MFP 201 by Mrs. Karen Nordia, and that will start shortly at 10 to 10.